So, Michael, I go around and check in on staff almost every day. And one of the things that I do, and I have a habit of doing, is just going in and saying, "How are you doing today?" And many of them just say, "Well, I'm doing well." Well, a couple times over the last few weeks, I've checked in with somebody that said, "I'm doing well, but I'm having a little bit of difficulty sleeping, having bad dreams. I'm not really getting enough rest, and I find myself a little bit agitated." And I'll just reflect back and go, "So that's well?" And my task is, what can we do to become better aware of what's going on within us?
Yeah, and it really, self-awareness is, to me, the key that makes everything go. If you do any type of like reading and on literature or in books about resilience, what they'll tell you is that the driving force to resilience is optimism. And I wholeheartedly agree that optimism is a huge piece to resilience. But to me, you have to be able to be aware of what's going on, particularly within you. So like the whole self-awareness piece. And recently I've added a second part to the self-awareness piece. So self-awareness is recognizing what's going on in me, but then also having awareness of how others are perceiving me in a certain situation or in a given moment as well. So to your point, when you ask people, "Hey, how are you doing?" and they give you the "I'm fine," but they might be lacking a little bit of self-awareness. And self-awareness can be difficult for people because if you're truly self-aware, you have to be able to admit to yourself what you're really feeling, what you're really thinking potentially in a certain situation. And sometimes people have thoughts that's probably difficult to admit, even just to yourself, that you were thinking that. Or in this case, "Hey, I'm fine, but I'm having, trouble sleeping, and these dreams that I'm having are starting to trouble me a little bit." And there's a lot that goes into that. There's personal pride that goes into that. That's how people were raised. There's certain stigmas around those things. So self-awareness can be difficult even if you're literally doing it for yourself.
Right. But you tied in a component there that's really, I feel like is really important. Whenever you do that self-awareness piece, how is hope generated with that self-awareness?
So number one, having the awareness is a huge thing. The second piece to having self-awareness is, what are you going to do about it, right? Because you can have all the awareness in the world, but if you choose to do nothing about it, it does you no good. And I think the hope and the optimism piece comes in if you can realize that, okay, now I'm aware. Now I've just got to figure out a process in which I can use to help me in whatever situation that is, whether it's what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, etc. I've got to develop a process. And I'll try that process. If that process doesn't work, guess what? You can always change a process. So having that kind of realization that there is that hope and that optimism that, yes, I am here today, but maybe I can get here tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, depending on what we're talking about. I think that's a big thing for people.
Yeah. Well, people in the medical profession, one of the things, whenever they set goals for themselves, have a tendency to set them very high.
Yep.
What is a strategy that can help to bring that bar down just a little bit so that they're creating for themselves win-win situations?
Yeah, so goal attainment is a huge thing. Goal setting is a huge thing. And you're right. There's a lot of people that set very high goals for themselves. And that's a great tool to use. But you have to be able to create, I would say, daily wins, to use your language.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to create daily wins. Otherwise, that big goal, as big as it is, it's out there. And if you're not creating daily wins, sometimes usually when people set big goals, it's more long term. So the motivation starts to wear off. And if I'm not stacking wins, as I would say it,
right,
a lot of times that's where people give up on their goals. A roadblock will come up, 3 months into something that's going to take you 12 months. A roadblock comes up, and because you're lacking motivation at that point, it's difficult to persevere through that. But if I'm stacking wins, right, and again, back to a process, if I'm focusing on a process and I trust that process, eventually that process will get me to that goal.
Yeah. So the stacking wins is almost, it's one of those things that is self-perpetuating and continues to build the momentum that is needed to get to the ultimate goal. Yeah. And whenever you see, because all of us, The great example is New Year's resolutions. We fall off the wagon so quickly.
Yeah.
But if you have those short-term goals that you're getting and you begin to stack, it gives the opportunity for me to miss the mark a little bit, but yet look back and see, this is where I started, this is where I'm at, I'm doing good.
Right. And there's, particularly with goals, and this is, so goal setting is a big part of sports psychology, which is my background.
Right.
And one thing that we recognize with people when they set these, we call them outcome goals, right? That's that big goal that's the outcome I want to achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ever happy when you get to that outcome?
Very, very rarely.
And even if you are happy, how long does that happiness really last?
Oh, short term.
Short term. And
Yeah.
usually what happens is okay, I achieved what I wanted to achieve, and what do people want? They want more.
They want more.
I hate to tell you, but with most things, you're always going to want more.
Right.
If you can teach yourself to fall in love with that process, right? And I'm stacking these wins day to day to day to day over a long period of time. Number one, if you're doing that and that process is the right process, guess what? You're going to get to your outcome. You're probably going to surpass your outcome to levels at which you probably didn't even think of when you set that outcome goal to begin with. And now your motivation is not tied to an outcome, it's tied to a process.
Yes.
Which now you continue to do that process day in, day in, day, right? So a lot of people like to talk about motivation. A lot of it, to me, goes back to discipline. If I'm doing these things on a day-to-day basis, eventually I'm going to get to where I want to be. A good example of this is working out. If I go to the gym and I work out one time, I come back, I look in a mirror. Do you see any change?
No.
If I go to the gym the next day, I work out again, so I did it 2 days in a row, come back, look in the mirror, do I see any change?
No.
But if I keep doing that every day for 6 months, and I look in the mirror, or I take a before and after picture, before 6 months, now after 6 months, and I compare those two, now do you see change?
Yes.
And you can't pinpoint what day your body changed.
Right.
It's, I had trust in the process. There's that hope and optimism again. I had trust in the process I was taking, and eventually I'm going to get to where I want to be. And like I said, oftentimes you see people surpass it versus people set a goal and then they get anxious about the goal that they set, particularly if time starts going by. Hey, I wanted to achieve this in a month, and now 3 weeks have gone by and I haven't seen very much progress. And I start getting anxious.
Yeah.
Right? Focusing more so on a process, stacking those daily wins will eventually get you to where you want to be.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is taking the eyes off of outcome and putting the eyes on process, because the process will eventually lead you to the outcome that you want. But if you focus on the process, what that does is it generates the motivation, it generates the hope, it keeps you going. Whenever you're looking at the outcome sort of is self-defeating.
Right.
Because I'm never seeing the steps that I'm taking to get to the outcome. But in the process, I'm working the process.
Correct.
And eventually, the outcome will be there.
Yeah, and think of those when you celebrate, particularly if you start celebrating those small wins.
Yeah.
Think about what that does to you. I mean, let's face it, these last 2 years have been difficult, particularly on a healthcare population.
Yes.
And there have not been a lot of wins in that 2 years. Let's be honest.
Yes.
This is a way to start seeing some wins and really starting to feel joy about those wins. And for some people, a win in pursuit of a goal might be getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night.
Right.
That's a start.
Yes.
But if I can experience some joy because I got 4 or 5 hours of sleep last night, hopefully that sets me up better today, and we start moving that process down the road, and eventually you get to bigger and bigger wins.
So, Michael, if I hear correctly, what you're saying is a major part of self-awareness and achieving what we want to achieve for ourselves is learning how to engage the process.
Yes. Yeah.
Putting aside the outcome and looking at the process and committing, being disciplined in the process, because ultimately that process is going to get us to the outcome that we desire.
Correct.
Excellent.